Hello, everybody. It's Fernando Labastida once again in another great episode of the Martechify podcast. Just to remind everybody, Martechify is a connected learning community where marketing professionals can share ideas, best practices, and success stories to help stay current in today's super fast moving and changing technology environment. I'm really excited to introduce Inga Broerman. Did I pronounce that correctly?
That was awesome. Great job.
Oh, okay, great. So Inga is a veteran marketing specialist specializing in scrappy, efficient marketing approaches to growth stage companies. She is an advisor, a strategic advisor to the tech and startups community. Yes, that's what it's called, is the tech and startups community. And she is currently the head of sales and marketing at BlueLogix. And she has worked at fantastic organizations such as Siemens, Pitney Bowes, Icon Office Solutions, a $9 billion company, to Series C startups and growth stage companies in the $30 to $25 million range. Welcome, Inga, to the podcast. Where do we find you today?
Thank you. Thank you for the very kind introduction. We are in the Washington D.C. area. So it is right outside in Virginia, in Northern Virginia, the tech corridor there.
Okay, that's great because I was actually at dinner this weekend with some folks who love going to Washington, D.C. for tourism. And
Uh,
it
it's a
is,
great place, honestly. It's just wonderful.
yes,
It's
yes.
it's exciting as well, I think, from a business perspective, because the tech community has become incredibly vibrant and exciting here over the last few years. It was a little bit, I mean, I'll never say, Washington D.C. was never sort of one of those, tech hubs. It's not Boston, it's not New York, it's not Silicon Valley. But it was always sort of like, we have very specific technology here. But in the last probably 2 years or 3 years, it's just grown intensely, and it's gone really far beyond, what typically you would see here as mill tech and government technology and things along those lines. And now you're starting to see it
Oh,
across the
that's
board. So it's incredibly exciting here right now, both because it's really cool to drive around and look at all the monuments, and also because, the people you run into here are really exciting. So
That's actually super cool. I had not known that about Washington, D.C., especially for the last 2 to 3 years. So that's
yeah,
maybe a topic for a whole podcast episode in and of itself, huh?
absolutely. Absolutely. We'd love to participate.
Well, I usually like to start off these interviews by understanding, how you got to where you are today from where you started out, right? So tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about your career trajectory, Inga, from the early days when you were, basically at, wow, Icon Office Solutions, National Accounts Outsourcing Analyst, all the way to where you are today, a startup advisor and head of sales and marketing.
It's interesting. I like to tell people about this. I'm a storyteller, number one. But number two, it's also because my career, sort of how I came into marketing, is a little bit different, I think, than most people's. I really started out actually in operations. So I started out in operations building imaging solutions, which was quite a while ago. That was the coolest technology in the world at that point. So it was imaging for large document populations and things like that. But what it gave me was a really clear understanding of like the deals you want to sell and the deals you don't want to sell. So from there, I moved into sales engineering. So really took some of my technical background and went in and worked putting deals together and putting together, solutions for customers. And then from there, went into sort of this analyst, pre-sales analyst. And then from there, jumped into what I call sales enablement. I'm not sure it falls into the current, nomenclature of sales enablement, but really building online communities for sales reps so they could go and find the information, the questions that they needed answers to, which, back at the time was not easy. And, there were 7,000
Yeah.
sales reps. So it was a little bit more difficult. And then from there went into marketing. So what I had was a very long career of measurable outcomes. So everything I did was very measurable. I went into internet marketing and I took with me like how many deals closed, what's the pipeline, how does this look like, what are the things that you need to do to get this deal in the pipeline, into the web, and then into, to a sales rep, and all the way through that process. We had one of the first CRMs, I think, that we hand built by ourselves, to catch everything that came from every possible source, and then be able to see what the dollar value associated with it was. So a full closed loop marketing, probably in the early the early aughts. And then from there, took that over to Siemens, which really needed this whole concept of we're investing so much into, digital marketing, into internet marketing, into our, Martech, at the time wasn't called that, but our Martech stack. And what are we getting out of it? So really being able to understand, okay, these campaigns cost this much and generated these results. And if we continue to do them, then we'll get this result at the end of the day. Therefore, this is how much our cost per lead is. And this is what we're going to invest in marketing in those different channels, which today sounds like table stakes, but at the time it was very interesting. And it's interesting because I also tend to see right now, and this is a little bit of, we'll talk about this later, I know. I tend to see right now there's still almost a disconnect between what you're doing from a marketing perspective and how it's actually impacting the top and bottom line. And I think for a lot of marketers, that's a really hard jump to make, because while you may be able to see what a cost per lead is, you may be able to even see what a cost per, acquisition is. If you don't know what that customer lifetime value is, and you don't really understand what's happening further down the line, you're getting customers for a year, for example, that, you're barely covering your cost to acquire them. That's not the marketing that we want to be doing. So, sorry, from there I went on, sorry, let me finish telling you the whole thing. So from there, I went on to working with smaller companies. So I really love seeing the results of what I do. So I jumped into working for startup companies. And so at that time, I was really working in those growth stage companies that are really in that, $50 to $100 million range, which again, you can see a lot of really exciting stuff in those. But from there, I went to doing fractional CMO work, which really was working with companies that are all across the board, but primarily sort of, I've got an idea and I want to monetize this. How do I do this? What's my go-to-market on this? What do I need to do to set this up as a product? And then from there, really worked at that 8 to 25 million range with companies that had some level of event coming up, and being able to prepare them for that and then get them set and able to move on to the next stage, really.
Right. And so when you say some kind of an event coming up, you're talking about some kind of funding round, or
yeah, so some kind of inflection point. It was I am launching a new product that is actually changing my business completely. So instead of selling, print supplies in a distribution network, I'm going to do a subscription-based service for print by page. And so that's going to change my whole business. Or I have a great idea for a new product that I have launched to a company who's like a friend of mine, but now I see there's a giant opportunity in the market for this. So I'm going to go build this product. How do we go to market with it? Or I'm launching something internally. I'm an existing company. I'm an existing organization. I might have, a new product that I'm launching from a new line of business. What do I do with this? So really spanning everything, very commonly, I'm going out for funding, I'm selling my company, or I'm a family-owned company, and I need to prepare for the next stage here.
So there's a lot to unpack there, and I know I have a ton of questions too. But I think one of the things you mentioned earlier about your trajectory was getting to that point where companies can actually measure lifetime value, can actually measure the impact of cost of leads acquired and cost of sales, et cetera.
Yeah.
It's so funny because marketers talk a good game about lifetime value, et cetera. But I'm thinking that not a lot of companies are actually being able to measure that.
It's a really hot conversation right now, it feels like, which is, this whole, MQLs and brand are useless, and, your demand gen doesn't mean anything. And what do you do? And I mean, there's a lot of fires being lit around it right now. I don't necessarily believe those fires, because I think that we can all go in and say, this is what my contribution to the company is at some level. But if you can't go in and say, I have a CRM that's going to tell me by campaign, however I'm attributing it, what what customers we're acquiring from it and how big they are and how much revenue they're producing. You need a campaign report that says, this is what this revenue looks like right now. And that means a lot of back-end integration. It means a lot of going into your service platform. It means going into a bunch of different places, pulling that information forward into your CRM. But if you can't do that and say, okay, this is what my customer profile looks like for acquisition, and again, I'm not saying last touch attribution is the greatest thing in the world. I don't believe in it. Honestly, we do a multi-touch point attribution model that essentially pulls all of the different things that they touched, even if that might be an ABM impression, or it might be, a LinkedIn impression or a LinkedIn engagement, be able to go backwards and say, these are all of the things that contributed to this revenue. And then here's how they break down. This company, they had 50 touch points before they became an opportunity and 100 touch points after they became an opportunity. Can we apportion out that revenue across all of those and see what it looks like? And that's
Wow.
honestly just from going back. Well, listen, I've done it the other way and it does not work because, I've had those things where, you get all excited. I've got 40,000 leads, coming in for this amazing new product that we're launching. And they're great leads and you're all excited, but really all it did was it clogged up your SDR, group. They couldn't find the good ones in there. And, and their ASP was, significantly lower than your primary product ASP. And they only stuck around for 3 months that's not a win. That's a loss. It's a great win. You're jumping around saying, I got 40,000 leads. We are the coolest thing since sliced bread, but you're not the coolest thing since sliced bread. You are actually creating issues for sales. So that's where a lot of that comes from, is really how do you balance those two things? So.
And I really like what you're saying, because it kind of it seems to me at first blush that it's like an attempt to sort of systematize a long-term strategy for the company so that they could become more profitable, they have a more sustainable approach to marketing that kind of fits in with everything else for the company.
It's a really interesting shift in really funding right now, like 2022 on, basically. 2021, 2020, 2021 was just free money for SaaS companies, just like throw the money at them, let's take it. But really, when the environment got more difficult and you started having to say, what are the results that I'm producing? Not just like, and again, it goes back to that, what are my last touch point attribution results? No, that's not, let's get more real than that. I talked to a sales rep a bunch of times. Okay, granted, I always go back, my story is really funny. There was a marketing technology platform that I downloaded, this is back ages ago, but I downloaded every white paper they ever sent. I went to every webinar that they ever did. And the poor SDR who was assigned to me, knew me. He left a voicemail message for me for 5 years. 5 years he left it for me. And they,
5 years.
yeah, no, poor guy. He traveled from company to company. He was like, hey, it's Justin again. I'd be like, hey, still not buying. Never talked to him. Finally, one day, my boss came in and was like, we need to buy this today. And I was like, great. Let me just get on the phone with Justin, who's never talked to me before. And I said, hey, we'd like to place an order. So in his system, that came in as like an inbound, right? There was nothing else in that, 5-year history of me, reading every white paper and going to every webinar and coming to their website a million times that would ever have gotten credit for that. And I always think about that moment when I figure out how I want to do attribution modeling. And it's a little rough. I mean, I went to a great event at Google, years and years ago when I worked for Siemens, those, private events that they do. And we had HP come up and talk about how they were measuring the effectiveness of TV advertising. And it's really hard because, again, the ad goes on TV and you can't say, they can do those URLs, but nobody ever goes to them anyway. So they did, basically, they flexed. And so they did a big testing scenario where they did different cities where they would ramp the advertising all the way to the ceiling and then drop it down the next week. And then they'd go to the next city and do the same thing. And then they did really a regression analysis to determine like what the impact was of those ads. And, they came up with, they understood very well, like what the ad impact was on a per basis and what the ad impact was on the average dollar spend and the ad impact, on a purchase basis and a timing basis and all that good stuff. And so they were able to make much more finite decisions because of being able to have that knowledge and that understanding. I've always sort of taken that with me. And I like to say I'm one of the few marketers who can say regression analysis and theoretically do it, though I don't want to. But being able to understand, if I ramp up my LinkedIn spend and I have a gazillion impressions, what's that going to do a week down the line from there?
It's interesting. With everything you just said right now just reminded me of a passage from a book called Killing Marketing by Joe Polizzi and Robert Rose. Have you read the book? Or
I haven't read it. I'm going to have to now, that just because the title is so fabulous. But I know Joe. I've read his stuff.
Yeah, Joe is awesome. But one of the story they talk about in Killing Marketing, just to, making the long story short, is they talk about a company that decided they were going to implement marketing because they really weren't doing any marketing. It was really more just a sales focused company.
Yeah.
And after, I don't know, I think it was about a year of marketing, they were not able to attribute any particular tactic to any
I,
significant amount of sales.
yeah.
But they what they were able to detect is in that year that they started implementing marketing,
Yeah.
sales and lead generation, everything went up. The numbers went up,
Yeah.
right? But they didn't have a way of doing that multi
Yeah. The
attribution
multi-touch point
analysis. It's a,
attribution. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
That's what, and I think that's where, and it's super interesting because I know, so I know I've come into companies before that have made significant investments in marketing, come exactly with that, point of like, I'm not seeing, any, I'm not seeing any benefit from the dollars that I'm spending on marketing. And there are two sort of points I make is that one, you're either you're not getting a benefit from it, or two, you are getting a benefit and it's buried in the weeds on other things. And that's where you can go back and do some of that, post, flexing to see, where things are coming from. But I think more importantly, what I tend to run into, and particularly with your earlier stage startup companies, is that they sort of like decided they needed to do marketing. They asked somebody, who's the agency you use? They go to that agency, and that agency is a little bit, and maybe, or they brought in a fractional or they brought in a team. And that agency is like, what everything is a nail, I'm going to pound it. I'm a hammer. I'm going to pound it. I mean, and it's just it's a very narrow. We all love the idea of, I can go spend some more money on paid search, or I can spend some more money on LinkedIn, and it's like coin operated. It's going to get me this much. But I just don't think that works anymore. And so when you get these smaller stage companies, they listen to, an expert who hasn't necessarily looked at their business and said, here's what you need to do. And it's very nuanced when you start digging into the business and saying, like the company that I have at BlueLogix right now. BlueLogix is a fabulous company, unbelievable software. It does billing for subscriptions for complex transactions. There is an ICP for that is about this wide, but there's a boatload of people who it's the only thing they need. Nothing else is going to work for them. And so if you clearly understand who that is and invest your marketing dollars in talking to them and establishing that trust with them, then your pipeline is going to grow huge. But if you go wide and do what some of these agencies are like, go out and buy a bunch of search ads and do a bunch, get 25,000 LinkedIn, leads, not helpful. If anything, all it does is, again, distract you and distract sales from following up on what's important and really getting the business. And so that's where you sort of have to take a step back and say, I'm going to build a strategy that, figures out what this product's superpower is or what this company's superpower is, and then who wants to buy it and then how they want to buy it, and then align my marketing activities that way. We flipped our whole script, essentially, and saying, we know it's a billing platform. People want to buy it, but there's a lot of consideration in a billing platform. This is your money. And, it's not going to be, they're going to go out on Google, do a Google search, and then come and buy your product. It's not going to work that way. You have to have a different marketing strategy that's going to, is going to capitalize on what their needs are and what their buying processes are.
So thank you so much for mentioning BlueLogix, because that was the perfect segue to my next question.
There you go. It's like I knew what those questions were.
Exactly. It's not like I sent you a list of questions ahead of time, right? No.
What?
But
there you go.
So tell us about your approach at BlueLogix, which is this kind of very unique, or this kind of niche billing platform. And I wanted to kind of see if you could emphasize a little bit more on that ICP, the particular needs, because every time I talk to a company that wants us to start changing their marketing or or putting the afterburners on the marketing, I said, listen, you really have to identify your ICP and what their pains are, what their problems are, and how you can uniquely fulfill that. So you were starting to touch on that, so I'd like to
so it's almost like you have to go backwards though and say, you have to really sit down and say, what does my product do that nobody else in the world can do? And that is, it's like your superpower. You identify your superpower, and then you go and say, okay, who needs this? And it's funny for BlueLogix, what we really did was isn't necessarily an industry that needs us. It is a specific set of components within that industry that needs us. And for us, what it is they sell through channel partners. They sell bundled goods. They sell some level of regulated, which might be communications, which typically it is communications. And they sell through, and they have heavy data requirements. And so meaning they're selling usage-based billing, or they're selling, so the companies they're selling, they're doing usage. And so they're doing, that's a very complex. And so it involves data from a lot of different sources and aggregating it. So those are sort of the four things that if somebody is doing sort of one or two of those four things, that is just a huge win for us. So then backing into that, saying what industries and what size companies and what geographic locations and what types of sales motions are they doing? And then identifying who those companies are. And so it's like ABM on steroids in some respects, because we go back and say, who are the companies that really are doing this? And then go back and say, what industry are they in? And what we end up with is essentially saying is we do unified communications as a service very well. But there's only 900 companies in that. We do managed services providers, which are selling UCaaS, and then we do state and local governments, which sounds a little odd, but they're charging departments back for usage. So it's not in your sort of here's an industry, and AI and SaaS companies that have moved more towards usage-based billing and pulling data in from other systems. We have a uniquely configured data ingestion engine that works with your service platform and makes it, super easy to do what we do. And so there's a lot of different things that it pulls in, and we know that's our ICP, and we go after those customers. If somebody comes in we used to go after sort of everyone who came in and needs subscription. And what we found was that it was more difficult to hold those customers. It was more difficult to, develop that relationship with them. When we go after customers who are in those ICPs, what we see is that not only do they stay with us, but they grow. They're companies in growth mode. That's sort of the fifth thing is companies that are in growth mode need us desperately because they do not have the time to deal with this kind of thing. So getting to that super finite level of who we deal with, we've increased our pipeline and our win rate. We've also increased the total volume of won deals, and we've increased our conversion rate. So the people who are coming in, we sort of have that ideal straight funnel that's like they came in and then they dropped out at the end and they became a deal. It's like sales, it makes sales a lot happier. And it makes us significantly more productive and more efficient, I think is probably the biggest win for us. Well, the biggest win for us is the revenue, but second biggest win is we do it pretty efficiently. So.
Well, and so then, like you said, backing into this, identifying the exact what is it? The use cases and the industries, and all these 4 or 5 things. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's not an industry. It's not a geo. It is a use case, and being able to understand what those are. Yeah. Yeah.
And so identifying that it would seem like as though that would dictate, BlueLogix or whatever company's go to market strategy. So instead of that,
exactly,
sort of like that what you talked about, the agencies wanting to, fit a round peg into a square hole, etc. It's you're customizing it depending on the thing. And then you say, okay, what are the strategies and tactics? So what did you, as a result of this, then what are you bringing to the table for your marketing strategy?
So for marketing strategy, we do it a little bit differently. So we understand very much who our industries are, and we understand what their buyer journey is. A lot of these guys may have a billing system, and they may have, something that sort of works, but they don't necessarily have something that works well, and it's not scaling for them. And so we identify what those pain points are for them. And then we go out and really, so the marketing strategy that we approach right now is really, it's twofold. One, it goes all based off of this idea of a very considered purchase. We know that this is a very considered purchase. They also typically are companies that have a lot of complexity in them. And so you can't go in and say, hey, we'll drop this billing platform in, and then you can go in and configure it. So we really have to get these multi-stakeholders. So we typically work with buying committees. We typically work with very long sales cycles, although not always. And we typically work with people who need to have some level of, okay, I trust you. And so we've sort of taken this stance that we're in a very low trust world right now for a variety of reasons, none of which, are worth talking about. But we're in a very low trust world right now. And what we have to do is be able to establish that trust. And so where that trust, so that was, again, a lot of our surveys, a lot of the surveys in the industries with CTOs and CFOs say, I need to work with somebody that I trust that they're going to deliver. And I trust because I've heard about them from somebody else that I trust, or I've worked with them at a previous company, or I've done, I've worked with, or they come in through a partner that I trust. And so we really bifurcated our strategy into 2 levels. One is heavy duty thought leadership and personal outreach, We have a lot of personal networks across, we have some great subject matter experts. We have some great thought leaders in the industry, and their networks are huge, and we really work with those. We also have a lot of people who graduate from one company to the next. So we're very specific on following those people. But it's also then we align with some of those industry leaders who talk. So we have a lot of influencer marketing, we have a lot of analyst relations, and a lot of those things are okay. Oh, I trust XYZ analyst group, therefore I'm going to trust these guys. And then the second piece is really partner marketing, and I think that's really where we see it's a very I mean, if a partner's bringing you in, they trust you. They're not going to bring somebody in that they don't trust. That for our decision makers means a lot. So we do a ton of partner marketing, and we do channel sales as well. So we've increased significantly our channel sales route to market, and we've really decreased that, what is honestly my, bread and butter over the years, which is, I can do predictive marketing for you and tell you if you advertise on Google this much that you're going to get this much out of it. That's not our marketing strategy anymore. Our marketing strategy is very different. It's more brand focused and it's more demand focused, which kills me as a, demand gen marketer. It kills me, but it's the right solution for this kind of sales motion. And so we focus on those primarily.
And when you talk about channel partners, are you talking about systems integrators who have a particular focus on your target market?
We have some of those, but we also have integration partners. So because it's an ecosystem, like when you do a billing platform, you've got to integrate with your CRM, you've got to integrate with your quote system, you've got to integrate with your ERP, you've got to integrate with the taxation engine, you've got to integrate with your service platform. So we have a lot of different integration partners. And then also you have your basics, Salesforce and AWS, who we also, integrate with or sit on their platform. And so they work with us a lot in their marketplace and also with their more focused efforts, particularly in sort of the SLED market. So we've really capitalized on those. And then we have the SIs, and then we just have referral partners. We have a network of consultants that work in our platform and really, make it hum, if you will. They are the ones who, they know everybody in the industry, and they're going to have a conversation with them, and then they're going to go in and have that incredibly smart conversation, that talks about the process for their recurring billing, renewal process, and, map that out for them, and then go in and be able to implement that. So that's really how we've extended, I think, a pretty concise and very cost efficient solution, like well beyond what we would be able to do internally. So I think our partners really do sit, at the nexus of what we're accomplishing here.
Well, so it sounds very cool. I love how it's sort of customized to your ICP, and you said it's killing you that is, as a
it is
demand gen person to do more of an inbound, branding, etc. But I love how you talk about how, it has to be really focused on what is the ICP. But
yeah.
So given this, what does your tech stack look like? It seems like as though, and I know you want to probably talk about something quickly before that, but how did you build your tech stack to manage this, what seems to me like a kind of a complex, bifurcated marketing strategy?
Well, and I hate saying this because it drives me nuts, but it's all really based around Salesforce. We are incredibly diligent about making sure that we're tracking everything. And so we track, in a variety of different ways, everything from, somebody from that company looked it up on G2, or somebody from there was in a Zoom, Zoom info, sorry, brain freeze here, an intent thing, or they saw an ad for us on our ABM platform. And so we sort of aggregate all of that data together. And then when they come in, either through us or through one of our partners, we make sure that we track everything, where they came from, and by that point, we've really analyzed, by that point, they've typically touched us a number of times. They also may have touched our partners. We can't track that as well, but typically speaking, we do meet with our partners and we enter in, that information, like they came to us on our website, or they came to us through, this conference or this trade show. And so we make sure that we're identifying both the online and the offline levers, and making sure that we're pushing all of those together into that one packet of information. And then from there, everything else is really integrated with, I mean, everything is integrated with Salesforce at the end of the day. So if we're using, and a lot of it has to do with understanding what the intent is. So we have two different models for intent. One is company level, and then one is individual person level. And we use our B2B for that. We use a couple of other platforms for that that'll show
Oh,
you.
Adam
Adam
Robinson's
Robinson,
company.
yeah. Yes,
Hmm.
it's very cool. I mean, at first when we looked at it, we were like, oh, yeah, right. But it works. I mean, it works and it'll tell us who the individual person is. So we actually use two or three of those to be able to make sure that we know. And then from there, we have a lot of individualized outreach through like an Apollo, or we use Clay as well. So being able, making sure that we're having that individualized outreach, but also being able to do it at scale. I mean, I think, the challenges as well. I mean, AI is great. Love AI. I'll use it all day to Sunday for a number of different things, but making sure that it actually is responsive to what what the experience of the person is as they've come to your website or they've submitted a form, and then from there, we have a bunch of different cold outreach types of platforms that we touch people on, and we've worked on configuring them so that we're getting through to the inbox, because I think one of the things that we're seeing most is that the inbox is very shut off right now to cold email. And so we need to do a lot to get around that, if you will. So,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh, exactly. Yes.
yeah.
Because I got my start in cold email outreach around 2018, 2019. You could
Oh,
use some kind of a customized first line, et cetera, and it was very effective. And now
exactly.
it's
It
like
was the
everybody's doing
gravy days. It was the gravy
it.
days. There were
Yes.
some platforms that I used them at maybe three or four different companies. And it was fabulous. The amount of pipeline that we got from those cold outreaches was just so huge. Problem is, when you look into your spam folder, it's all those companies. I mean, it's everyone. I look at my spam folder, I'm like, I actually own a subscription to that product. Why is it going to my spam folder? But it is. So you've
Yeah.
got to get, I think, scrappy on how you're doing it. You've got to be, and I say, like, when you talk about what our marketing technology stack is, I'm telling you, whatever it is today, it's going to be something different tomorrow, because there are so many platforms out right now that can help us get where we want to go. But there's always something new coming along. And so we have one thing that we're
Yeah.
using is a names database right now. And then another platform came out and said, oh, by the way, we're actually aggregating all of the sends to that email into one. And if it's bouncing on this guy's platform, we're going to know about it and we're going to tell you about it. I'm like, that's just, I mean, that's perfect. So
Yeah.
there's where, we look at it and say, there's something, we may be using ChatGPT today for content,
Mhm.
or we might be using, something very different tomorrow. We're always testing those things and seeing what the best fit is for what we're trying to accomplish.
So you use AI. So how exact are you using AI for creating content? And if so, how are you doing that? Like, are you using,
Yeah.
custom GPTs or projects or how? Yeah.
We have a very sort of custom GPT, all around our product and around our competitors. And so we're able to use that to generate content. I'm really lucky in that I have a team of super enthusiastic marketers, but they're junior. And they are
Hmm.
also, which I love. I mean, I love that all day to Sunday. They're super enthusiastic, they're junior, and they're also overseas. And so you got to have a lot of guardrails on that at that point, because they'll write something and I look at it and I'm like, what? Like, are you kidding? And so what we're able to do basically is build a framework that are sort of our concepts and ideas, and then they can go in there and say, on this particular front, give me the competitive overview of what others are saying about this, or give me all of the ads that are running, or and help me to write some Americanized content on there. And so we're able to generate quite a bit of content just from like our blog posts, and then we actually take that and we do a very wide distribution of our content. We sort of go everywhere we possibly can. That'll take
Oh,
us.
okay.
That's a very, we're very active on Reddit and Quora and Medium, and obviously on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. We're starting Discord, although I'm not 100% sure that's a good idea. But there's a number of different platforms that we play on. We do a lot of podcasts and blog posts and things like that, guest posting and things like that. So we try and go as wide as we can, because again, it goes back with our marketing strategy, which is to touch people where they are. What we found really so weird, Reddit is fabulous for us for generating leads, which I can't imagine that I'm saying, but it's great because people go there for authentic conversation. And those are really
Yes.
sort
I
of,
was going to ask you
yeah,
about. Yeah.
yeah,
Could you drill down on that? Because I know I mean, people, for
yeah,
some reason, I think that Reddit, because I'm not very active on Reddit, but I've had friends who are
I,
like deep in the Reddit
yeah,
rabbit hole and
yeah.
they just try and shut down people who are commercial. So you almost have to be just
Oh,
kind of almost a part of an authentic part of the community. So
that's
tell me
what,
about that. Yeah.
yeah, that's what really matters. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, you pick your communities that you can spend time on. But what we found, and there's a couple of reasons for doing this. The first was um, Google is apparently, and this is a relatively new thing, pro, preferring Reddit conversations over other conversations. And so if you go in there and you search for some of what are very long tail, searches for us, which is really where people come to us, you'll see that Reddit is like, number 3, 4, 5, and 10. And that's a really interesting thing for us because when you look at the space on the search results, you've got Chat GPT or you've got you've got the Google, GPT at the top or the Google AI results at the top. You've got a
Right.
couple of paid results. Then you've got like a bunch of Reddits. And, by the time you get to the third page or so, you might get to, our content, even if it's a very specific search. So what we've said is that, we see they are, there was, I don't know if you saw this a couple of weeks ago, an analysis of HubSpot's SEO traffic came out and they had dropped by
Yes,
80%.
everybody was
That was
analyzing it.
But I totally get it. Like, I totally understand why that happened. When you see that they're prioritizing third party above your website owned content, then you've got to be on those third party platforms. And so it's key is being able to get out there and have those authentic conversations. And so it's you can't mention your brand because they will suspend you, as we have found numerous times. And you can't really, you can't commercial it, but you can answer questions. And, because we have this incredibly deep knowledge on some great topics that get good customers for us, that for us is a great way to engage. So we do a lot of founder-led marketing. We do a lot of our SMEs are
Love
very active on those forums, and they really build answers, that start to get traction on that. And again, for us, traction isn't like 10,000 people contributed to this string. For us, it's like the 10 right people contributed to that string or saw it.
ICP that you talked about at the
It's
beginning.
our ICP. Yeah. And so I think
Mm.
anytime you're working on sort of enterprise level accounts and you have a structured approach to how you're going after them, that sort of 10 people approach is a great it's a great pipeline generator. And we just tend to see that a
Yeah.
little bit more than other things. So
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned founder-led marketing. That's, Adam Robinson, CEO of our B2B, does
yes,
that,
Chris
and
Walker does
so I've
that.
got.
There's a bunch of others that are
Mhm.
doing it that I think are so um it goes back to the whole founder-led sales things. I think when companies are at a certain size, having the founder there doing sales is so critical because they understand what their vision is. They understand. And again, with our product, it is so complex. Our whole goal is to make your billing simple. But in order to do that, we have to be very complex. And so my CEO can get up on these calls with people or get up and talk about things that, 98% of the people in the room are just going to be like, no clue what they're talking about. But the 2% that do are going to be like, nobody else can do that. Like are you sure you can do that? You're sure you can do that. And our CEO is like, absolutely. We do it for this customer, and this customer. And that really makes a big difference.
Oh,
So we just translated that over into marketing and said, he does a lot of videos. He does a ton of, he isn't out as much on doing social media itself, but he does these videos and then we're able to chop them up and play with them that way.
okay, great. I'm gonna have to check it out because I've been talking about founder-led marketing a lot lately in some of my LinkedIn
Yeah.
posts.
Yeah. It works well. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, I don't know, your most successful marketing campaign or initiative. I'd love to hear,
So
and it can either be from your current engagement or something from the
no, I
past.
know. So I think it's sort of, I mean, I have two levels of this. First, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I totally would have told you that it was the campaign that produced like 40,000 leads in 3 months. And, we touched everybody in the PR industry who ever would need it with social media and blah, blah, blah. But like, I also understand that maybe that wasn't as helpful because, 40,000 leads are hard to sift through. And if you're running, over the last probably 8 years or so, have started running the SDR team and starting sales teams. And I completely understand from their side now that that's not a success. So I would go back and say is that probably my biggest campaign that I would say is a success, and this sounds really, this is again sort of a little counterintuitive, but I worked for a company during the start of COVID that was a revenue cycle management company, which is they do billing for providers, and those providers, at the beginning of COVID, that was hugely problematic. But what the company that I work for did was they did billing and negotiations and settlements for out-of-network claims. So if you go to a surgery center, for example, and they're out of network with your insurance company, but you have to go there because they're the only guy, in 1,000 miles who does this particular surgery, you have to go there. Then the surgery center is only going to get like 5% of what they bill. And so what we did was we actually went back and negotiated with the insurance companies based on a ton of data. We had a software platform that people could see what had been paid, in real life. And then we negotiated with them. But in the beginning of COVID, that all went away. Like all the surgery centers, all the behavioral, the treatment centers went away. Like it all shut down. And so these guys were like broke, like they had no money coming in. And so what we did was we actually did a giant campaign around it that basically talked to them about going back over their last year's worth of claims and getting money for claims that hadn't been paid fully. And so for these guys, this was hugely important. So we partnered with one of the leading publications in the industry, who had the ear of everyone, who was talking that were our specific areas, and went back and we did an enormous amount of thought leadership around it. And we did a lot of sort of, I hate saying this urgency marketing, but saying, hey, you got, 60 days left of runway, you need to be doing this right now. And, they can pay it and they will pay it. And we have a proven methodology. So we went back on that. And again, partnering with this industry, we just hit, and I say it's one of my most successful campaigns just because it hit, like these are guys who are literally getting $0 coming in the door, and it hit a market that was just, it needed it so badly. What it did for us internally was great because most of our customers sort of were shutting down as well. So we were, that was a challenge for us. We did a lot of flipping things around so that it was a much more automated approach. It was a much more digital approach. We actually, we did a lot of retooling the way things were done internally and be able to get this out to as many people as possible and get them on, get them in our platform. So, it was a great campaign, both from a feel good perspective, as well as I think from a revenue perspective, it was pretty substantial. And then from a, how did we switch the way we were doing things? It was at that point we were sort of thinking out of the box, on everything. Yeah. And that was how, most companies are doing at that point. So it was good.
Yeah.
So I say that one.
Yeah. So I there's so much to comment on this case study. So first of all, you actually helped rescue companies that were bleeding cash or had no cash, the close to empty on their tank. And it also helped you all, because your customers were liquidating or whatever.
Exactly. Our customers were going down to zero as well. Like they were all really big problems. Yeah.
And then you followed because I'm starting to see a pattern here with you, Inga, that is that you really trying to be very you're trying to execute marketing strategies that are very customized to the ICP. So you were able to identify this publication that had the ear of these customers. Yeah. And then you incorporated something that's more like a traditional marketing, like some of the 6 points of persuasion that Robert Cialdini talks about, the urgency thing, which is classic marketing, but so, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think at the end of the day, look, I've been doing marketing for a really long time and even other things before that. I think at the end of the day, when you're sort of young in your career, you get all excited about these things because they're exciting. I used to love coming into work every day, in the aughts and seeing, 4,000, demo requests this quarter. That's awesome. but again, you sort of go through that path of saying that's great, but maybe it's not so great. And then this, thing, which is really exciting for me, is great, but oh, look, when I look at it a little bit further out, it's maybe not so great. And starting to get into things at the more detail level. And what I tend to call, and I don't mean this in any way, shape, or form to be derogatory, because again, I came through that path. It's harder marketing to sit down and say, I'm going to figure out what segment needs this product. It's very strategic marketing. We call it sort of big M marketing versus little M marketing. And the big M marketing is saying, we've done this, I've done this for a number of companies since then, which is to say, what's the market that you're not currently thinking about for your product that might be huge, that might be, and if you tweaked your product just a little bit and you maybe renamed, the top, logo on the corner, that there's going to be a huge market out there that might like triple or quadruple the size of your company. Those are the kinds of companies that I like working with.
That is so cool. And one of the things that I'm really kind of dying to hear about is how did you identify that publication? So that publication and it seems like a very niche or a very niche publication that had the ear of these.
Niche.
Yeah. How did you find out about that publication?
It was understanding who our customers were reading, who they were engaging with. And then they also, it's a fairly decent sized publication, but they do things, they do events, they do publications, they do webinar, they do a number of different things. And it was really understanding. So we actually had our sales team talk to customers, and they were willing to pick up the phone and talk to us because they didn't have any patients coming in at that point. But they were willing to talk to us about who they trusted the most and like what were the things that they did. And we had a relationship with that publication already, but we hadn't doubled down on them anywhere near enough because we didn't have a good enough understanding that was the place where people went, that it was the place. And that really made a big difference for us. So it was really talking to our customers and understanding what they were looking for.
Okay, great. I want to change direction a little bit. I want to kind of circle back around to something that you mentioned earlier about your young junior team that is overseas. What is the size of your marketing team currently?
So we have 8 total. But that includes our overseas staff. That includes, we have a couple of contractors as well. And again, we are very, I'd say we're economically efficient. We're very economically efficient. So what it means is that we have to put processes and systems in place, as well as, again, sort of using the AI and using the other systems that give us the guardrails that we need. Because, if you have somebody who's sort of in the office next door, it's super easy to sort of yell over them and be like, hey, are you sure you meant to write that? Like, maybe that wasn't the best. But when it's a team that's doing really a machine sort of approach, which I don't like to say that we're a machine, but we are, much more structured that way because of, the benefit of having people who are overseas and the people who are a little bit more independent, if you will.
Yeah. And then second to last question, or maybe the last question, it depends on how much time we have. And I can't believe the time has flown. It's been so much talk, so much fun talking to you.
It's great talking to you too.
Yeah. What do you see are MarTech trends for 2025? And I know that, before we, offline, when you're talking to one of my colleagues, you were mentioning about how you don't have to pay enterprise prices for MarTech stuff, anymore,
Yeah.
But, like, what are you saying in terms of trends for 2025, 2026 and beyond?
I think so I think there's 2 levels of trends. The first is sort of what are the industry or market trends that are going to drive trends in the MarTech sort of, sector. And I think that the biggest thing is, again, I go back to this lack of trust. There's so little, we live in this trust society where you have to establish trust with people in a different way than I think we've been able to do for the last 15 years or so. You have to be able to understand, the importance of having logos on your website, or the importance of having case studies that, people that resonate with people and they understand what those are. I know we've always looked at those, but it's not just that. It's also being able to have sales reps who can reach out in an authentic way, but they can do it at scale. So I think that's one big sort of industry trend, is this lack of trust. I think the second industry trend is the need to be more efficient economically. It just isn't the heyday of like, let's go out and spend money and we'll pay, $12,000 for, to acquire one customer. It's just not going to work that way anymore, which I think like bubbles down into then what our marketing technology trends are, which are really, you're going to have to, and I think this is true regardless of whether you're working in the startup space or whether you're working in, a very large enterprise, is you're going to have to be scrappy on what you're using, because it isn't there. It's just, you're going to have to use a number of different tools to achieve the same thing that you maybe could use one tool for previously. You're going to have to use a number of
Yeah.
different tools, and you're also going to have to switch them around, because the pace. So that's sort of the second one, which is the pace of technology, sort of at the marketing technology. The pace of technology. I mean, we might be switching out different pieces of our platform like every 3 months. I kid you not. I don't do any 12-month contracts anymore if I can possibly get out of
Jeez.
it, because it's things like, this names database doesn't work anymore, or this company came out with a whole new way to do, like, personalization, or this company came out with, this, ability to derive AI out of your CRM, or, this different platform is now able to do, a regression analysis on all of your marketing data. Those are the kinds of things that you're like, I need to do that right now. You can't say, I'm going to maybe look at that for next year. You have to be able to do it right now. So being able to make sure that you're on top of what those technology trends are. So it really makes it so you really need to have somebody who is a marketing technology specialist, who is not just like my RevOps guy, but who understands, like, here are the 8 products that are coming out right now. These 3 are absolute BS. They totally don't do anything they say they're going to do. But these 5 are actually ones that we might want to consider replacing what we're currently doing, and be able to do it quickly, and be able to do it without creating havoc in the system that you have currently. So I think it's, and again, the bigger your organization, the harder it is to do that, because of the adoption curve sort of thing. But regardless, you still need to be able to look at what those tools are and be able to figure out how to get them integrated into your stack if the need is there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I love the focus on, being able to be agile about it, looking for
Yeah.
something that you don't have to be locked into 12 months or even pay a lot of money for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I think those are all things that, we're just going to see accelerate as we go through, and I think at some point it's going to start getting too much, if it's not there already, because, working with the Tech Plus startups community, the thing that I see, I mean, the number of people who are coming out with like really cool little, you know, niche products is
mhm,
great. And I'm sure, people who need those, but when you're really trying to manage like a full marketing technology stack, it starts to get, a little bit sort of head spinning, like, oh, that's so cool. Okay, no, wait, no, I need to do this. So it's sort of a
yeah.
balance between the two, I think, at the end of it.
Well, listen, Inga, this has been so much fun talking to you. I've really enjoyed this, and I know that you are currently working as a head of sales and marketing. But if people have any questions for you, do you mind them contacting you at your
Absolutely.
LinkedIn
No,
or what? Yeah,
absolutely. Feel free to reach out to me at my LinkedIn, or head on over to BlueLogix.com, and you can check it out over there too. So,
and it's Inga Broerman, Broerman, and
that is it. Yep.
it's perfect. So
All
thank you
right.
so much. Really appreciate it. And we will see everybody in the next episode of Martechify.
All
Talk to
right.
you
Thank
then.
you so much. It was great talking to you.